When Karen moved to the neighborhood, she decided that she owned everything, including the dirt road that ran in front of my farm. I've met a lot of slackers in my life. I've seen neighbors steal Wi-Fi. I've seen people save parking spaces with plastic chairs. I've even seen a guy who tried to convince the bank that he found someone else's credit card and that it wasn't theft. But Karen, oh, Karen was a whole new level of prick. From the first day this woman set foot in the neighborhood, I felt in the air that she was going to be a problem. Some people arrive in a new place and try to adapt. Others arrive and try to adapt the place to them. Karen was on the second team. With that practical store manager's hair and a tone of voice that sounded like she was always complaining to a telemarketer, she introduced herself as the new president of the Neighborhood Association, HOA. The difference was that the HOA only existed in her head. This region had no HOA. It never had one. Everyone who lived there knew that everyone looked after their own property, and that, if someone had a problem with something, it was solved by talking. But Karen didn't care about talking. She wanted rules. Rules made by her, to benefit her, and that, somehow, everyone had to follow without question. The first sign that things were about to go off the rails was when official signs started appearing around the neighborhood. No parking here. Fine for those who don't cut the grass. There. Maintenance fee. There. Nobody took it very seriously, because, right? Who was this woman to be in charge of anything? But the final straw came when she decided that the dirt road in front of my farm was part of her territory. The road had been there for decades, ever since my grandfather was alive. It was a dirt track, full of potholes and surrounded by trees, that connected a few farms in the region to the main highway. And guess what? It was on my property, registered document and all. But that didn't stop Karen from deciding out of the blue that she now managed the road. I learned of the absurdity when I arrived home from the city and found a makeshift gate blocking the entrance. It was a gate made of old iron, the kind that someone had clearly taken from the dumpster of a construction store and stuck in the ground anyway. And to complete the work of art, a large handmade sign, badly painted with red paint, saying, "Private Road, for HOA residents only." Ah, but she was playing with the wrong person. I got out of the truck with a calm I didn't even know I had. I analyzed her contraption as if I were evaluating an exhibition of modern art. I went to the gate, and, on the other side, I saw Karen standing there with a notebook in her hand, as if she was about to fine me for existing. "You're breaking the community rules," she announced, with a tone that made it sound like I was a dog invading a flower bed. I laughed. I couldn't help but laugh. "It's my road, woman." She looked at me as if I'd just told her the earth was flat. "That's not true. This road is part of the HOA. And where is the documentation that proves that?" She hesitated. Of course she hesitated, because there was no document. "Everyone knows that this road has always been a community space," she insisted. Ah, that was new. The woman had just moved in and was already lecturing on local history. Interesting. Funny, because I have papers registered at the notary's office saying that this road is part of my farm. Do you want to see it? She didn't want to see it. What she wanted was for me to put my head down and accept her madness. Like any good self-proclaimed liquidator, she didn't like being contradicted. And like any good slacker, she believed that if she spoke confidently enough, she could convince anyone that she was right. The problem is that I've owned this land too long to fall for a trick like that. But, as it turned out, she wasn't the least bit concerned about documents or legality. The next day, I found out that she was charging a maintenance fee to anyone who wanted to pass along the road. $5. That's right. She was standing at the entrance to my farm, with a little notebook and a straw hat, charging a toll to use my road. I could have called the police at that very moment. I could have knocked down that gate at the base of the truck. I could have called a lawyer and ended the joke right there. But I wanted to see how far she would go with this. I wanted to know how far someone could go in a huff before falling off the horse. And, my friend, she did. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it. There she was, sitting on a folding lawn chair, holding a notepad and a pen, as if she were controlling the entrance to a VIP parking lot. Next to her was a makeshift table, on which rested a glass jar with a handwritten label. Maintenance fee, $5. She was charging a toll to pass on the road to my farm. I stopped the truck at the entrance and stared at the aberration for a while. The scene looked like something out of a bad cartoon, the kind where the villain is a bossy lady who decides to tax the air people breathe. And the most absurd thing? Some people were paying. They were locals, people who didn't want any trouble. Some probably thought that if they avoided the problem, it would go away by itself. Others, it seemed, were used to dealing with little neighborhood dictators like Karen and would rather give up $5 than waste 30 minutes arguing with a crazy woman. But I'm not that kind of person. I got out of the truck and walked towards her, slowly, to savor the moment. Karen saw me and squared her shoulders, preparing for the clash. She was excited, as if she had finally found a worthy enemy in the imaginary battle she was fighting in her head. "Good morning," she said, as if she were welcoming me to an event she had organized. "You can pay in cash or by app transfer." She looked at me as if she was sure I would follow her rules. "Are you really doing this?" I asked, gesturing to the toll. "Of course," she said proudly. "This road belongs to the community, and someone has to look after it." "Community?" I laughed, putting my hands on my waist. "You mean me? Because I'm the one who has to keep this road in order." Karen snorted, as if I was being an ignoramus incapable of understanding the grandeur of her mission. "This isn't about you. It's about the whole neighborhood. If everyone contributes, we can ensure that this road is always in good condition." "That's funny," I scratched my head, pretending to think, "because I pay a guy to level this road with a tractor at least twice a year, and he's never charged me $5 a ticket." She squinted, suspicious. "Maintaining a road is expensive." "Yes, and that's why I take care of my road." She ignored it completely. "If you want to pass, it's $5. I could have laughed again. I could have called the police right there. But no, I wanted to see how far this woman would take this insanity. I crossed my arms. "Let's say I don't pay." Karen smiled in her typical way, a smile that said, "I've thought of everything, asshole." "Then you can't pass. And how exactly are you going to stop me?" She patted the makeshift gate, which was locked with one of those cheap padlocks you buy in any hardware store. "I have the key." "Ah, now I was really enjoying myself. So, tell me something," I continued, pointing to the road. "What happens if I just drive over that gate?" Her smile faltered for half a second before returning in full force. "That would be vandalism," she replied firmly. "I'd have to call the authorities." "Good," I said, pulling my cell phone out of my pocket. "Let's call the police then." This caught her off guard. She clearly hadn't expected me to take this initiative. I saw her eyes take that quick glance to the side, as if she was looking for a way out. But there was no way out. And that's when Karen made the mistake of doubling her bet. "You don't have to be so radical," she said, trying to sound reasonable. "We can sort this out between us." "No, we can't," I retorted, already dialing the number. "Because you're blocking my property and charging an illegal toll." Before I could press the button to make the call, one of the neighbors, a gentleman called Tom, who had lived there for over 30 years, approached the gate. He was driving one of those sturdy old trucks, the kind of vehicle that could drive through a brick wall with no problem. Tom lowered the window and, with no patience for frills, shouted, "Is this a road hijacking?" Karen smiled in her artificial way. "No, it's just a voluntary contribution to the upkeep of the community." Tom looked at me, I looked at him, and then, without saying another word, he put the truck into reverse and, bam! He hit the makeshift gate with a force that sent wood flying everywhere. The silence was absolute. Karen went pale. She couldn't even react immediately. Tom's truck drove on as if nothing had happened, and I, suppressing a laugh, approached the pile of rubble that had once been Karen's barrier. "I guess your toll booth closed its doors, huh?" She finally came out of her trance and started shouting about lawsuits, vandalism, destruction of property. which, in this case, wasn't even hers to begin with. But nobody gave a damn. The people who had paid the fee started asking for their money back, and Karen stood there, lost, holding that ridiculous little jar with everyone's $5 in it, as if she could resurrect the toll by sheer force of will. The best part? The next day, she came back with an even more absurd plan. Because, apparently, losing a battle of logic and common sense wasn't enough for Karen. She needed to double down on the crazy, and I couldn't wait to see how far this nonsense would go. If I thought Karen was going to accept defeat and get on with her life, well, I was underestimating the human capacity to insist on error. Because the next day, there she was, standing in the middle of the road, holding up a new sign, this time in big letters and full of exclamation marks. Road closed for repairs. HOA property. Yes, she had simply decided that if she couldn't charge a toll, then no one else could pass. I sipped my coffee and just watched from the balcony of my farm. It was fascinating to see someone sinking deeper and deeper into an absurd idea. And the most unbelievable thing? She was taking it very seriously. This time, Karen had brought reinforcements. 2 guys were with her, dressed in reflective vests, as if they were real road workers. They were probably friends, relatives, maybe even some poor sod she'd hired, promising that this was a community project. And to complete the act, there were traffic cones and even some tools scattered on the ground, as if a major construction project was about to take place. A shovel here, a bucket of paint there, all just to make it look legitimate. But there was one small detail that made the whole scene ridiculous. There was no work going on. The road was exactly as it had always been. No new potholes, no mysterious cracks, no landslides. It was just a lame excuse to continue his tyranny. I took out my cell phone and started filming. If Karen wanted to put on a show, at least I would have a record for posterity. The first victim of the new road dictatorship was a neighbor named Paul. Paul was a quiet guy, a retired truck driver, who always passed by to cut his way into town. When he saw the cones and the sign, he got out of his truck and went straight to the point. What the hell is this now? Karen, with all the pomp and circumstance of someone who thinks she's really in charge of something, announced, "The road is closed for repairs. Safety issues." Paul scratched his head and looked at the road, completely intact. Then he looked at the 2 poor guys in reflective vests, who were clearly uncomfortable with the scene. "And where are the repairs?" Karen pointed vaguely at the ground. "We're still in the planning phase." Paul blinked a few times. "So there's no work." "There will be," she retorted. Paul sighed, looked at the cones and then at me, who was still filming from afar. Then, without saying another word, he got back into the truck, shifted into gear, and simply drove over the cones like they were dry leaves in the fall. Karen screamed in outrage, as if she had just witnessed a war crime. "That's rape!" Paul didn't even bother to reply. He just drove on, shaking his head like someone who has seen everything in life and has no more patience for other people's craziness. And that's when Karen decided to call the police. That's right. She dialed 911 as if she were reporting an attack on public safety. She stood there with her hand on her waist and the phone to her ear, making the biggest fuss. "Yes, I'm here on HOA Road, and a man has just destroyed an official repair zone. He didn't respect the safety barrier and put the whole community at risk." I could only laugh. First, because there was no such thing as an HOA road. Second, because no one there was at risk, except the collective patience of the neighborhood. But Karen thought she was killing it. She ended the call and crossed her arms, looking around like someone expecting applause. "The police are going to sort this out," she announced triumphantly. And indeed, a patrol car pulled up about 20 minutes later. 2 officers got out and came towards her. Karen assumed her best victim posture and started spouting words as if she were a witness to a heinous crime. This man completely ignored a secure work area. He went ahead without authorization and destroyed HOA property. The officers listened with an expression that I can only describe as What is this woman talking about? They turned to me, who was still standing there, casually leaning against the fence, holding my cell phone. Can you explain what's going on? One of them asked. Ah, but I could. I showed them the videos. I explained that the road was part of my farm, that Karen had no authorization to block it, and that this was her second attempt to take possession of the road by force. The policeman looked at Karen. Do you have any official documents proving that this road belongs to the HOA? And that's when I saw, live, the exact split second when Karen realized she was in trouble. She opened her mouth, hesitated, looked around as if looking for a way out, and then said the most Karen thing possible. I know that road belongs to the community. The policemen exchanged a look, and then one of them replied with the patience of someone who has dealt with this type of person before. Knowledge is not a document. The house fell down. Karen still tried to argue, but the policemen weren't interested in listening. They ordered her and her helpers to remove the cones immediately, and if she tried to block the road again, she could be charged with trespassing and obstruction of a public way. She turned purple. Not from shame, because that feeling clearly didn't exist in her dictionary, but from anger at not having gotten what she wanted. This is an injustice, she complained, while kicking a cone aside. What's unfair is that someone thinks they can steal a road just because they want to, I retorted, with a smile that I knew would make her even angrier. The police left, and Karen, defeated once again, picked up her trunks and disappeared. But I knew that wasn't the end of it, because if there was one thing I had learned about this woman, it was that she didn't give up easily. And the next day, she came back with lawyers. If I thought Karen was finally going to accept defeat and get on with her life, it was because I hadn't yet grasped this woman's level of delusion. The day after the roadblock fiasco, I was quietly going about my business on the farm when I spotted something in the driveway. A black car, one of those elegant models that lawyers like to drive to look important. Oh, she hadn't done that. I left the house and walked there, already knowing that I was going to find Karen accompanied by some fifth-rate lawyer, hired in a hurry to give her scam a veneer of legality. And of course, there she was, standing next to the car, with her arms crossed and that air of superiority of someone who thinks they finally have a card up their sleeve. Next to her, a man in a cheap suit and leather briefcase, trying to look professional, but already showing in his gaze that he knew he was defending a lost cause. "Good morning, sir," he said, straightening his glasses. "My name is Robert Carter. I'm an attorney for the HOA, and I'm here to discuss the legality of using the road that runs through this property." Ah, so now we had an imaginary HOA with legal representation? Interesting. I crossed my arms and made my best bored face. "The HOA?" I asked, with a smile. "But the HOA doesn't exist." The lawyer snorted, flipping through some papers as if that was going to change anything. "Yes, there is, sir. And my client here," he gestured towards Karen, who smiled like a queen waiting to be crowned, "has documents proving that the road is a community asset. Now, I'd like to see it." "Show me." I held out my hand. He hesitated for half a second before handing me a stack of papers. I took it and started leafing through it, already prepared for a legal circus. And, as expected, what I found was a pile of nonsense. To begin with, most of the documents were internal regulations from some other HOA, probably downloaded from the internet and filled out anyway. None of them mentioned the road or had any validity on my property. But the best part came at the end. There was a hand-drawn map with markings made in pen, showing the road as if it were a public domain area. Yes, a pen. It was the most amateurish thing I've ever seen. It looked like something a child would have done to convince their parents to let them stay up late. I looked up at Karen, holding back my laughter. "Are you presenting me with a pen-drawn map as legal proof?" Karen snorted. "This map is based on real information." Based on real information? This was done in a school notebook. The lawyer snorted, clearly realizing that this was turning into a disaster. "Well, the point here is that there is an argument for community use of this road. No, there isn't, I retorted. This road is in my name. It's been registered for years. He tried another approach. But, sir, my client believes that this road should be public, given that it is used by several residents. Wait a minute, I interrupted. Are you saying that she believes? Because belief is not a document. The lawyer didn't reply for a moment. Karen, on the other hand, snorted and decided that she was going to take charge of the situation. This road should belong to the HOA, she fired. It's unacceptable for a single owner to control a resource that is essential to the community. I took a deep breath and decided to get it over with. Look, I'm running out of patience. This road doesn't belong to the HOA because the HOA doesn't officially exist. This road belongs to me. And if you keep insisting on this, then I'm going to take this nonsense to a real court. Now, it was the lawyer's turn to turn pale. Because, you see, lawyers like that love to intimidate people with empty threats. But the last thing they want to do is actually take a ridiculous case like this to a real judge. But Karen? She still hadn't accepted reality. "It's not over," she shouted, pointing a finger in my face. "I'm taking this to higher courts." The woman was talking as if she were in a UN tribunal trying to resolve an international crisis. The lawyer had clearly realized that he had got the wrong client. He took the papers from my hands and started to say that he would review the documents and get back to you, which, translated into Portuguese, means let's pretend this never happened and move on. Karen stood there, stomping her feet, huffing angrily, until she finally got into her car and drove away. "It was a pleasure, sir," said the lawyer, without any enthusiasm, before getting into the vehicle and disappearing with her. And then, finally, I thought it was over. But, of course, I was wrong, because a week later, I woke up to a strange noise coming from the road, the sound of machinery. I left the house and went to the entrance of the farm, and what I saw almost made me lose my mind. Karen had hired a tractor driver to renovate the road. Yes, the woman had paid someone to come to my farm's road and start throwing gravel as if it were an official city project. I approached, trying to understand the level of madness this woman had gotten herself into. The tractor driver, a nice man called Joe, looked at me and waved. "Good morning. Your neighbor here hired me to improve the road. She said you had an agreement." But this woman has no limits. Joe saw the look on my face and realized something was wrong. Something wrong. "Joe, I didn't make a deal. This is my road." He was surprised. He looked at Karen, who was already coming towards us, and then looked at me again. "She paid me in advance." Karen came storming in. "You can't stop a community project." "Community work my ass. You're literally paying a guy to mess with my property without permission." "Now, that's enough." I pulled out my cell phone and called the police. This time, it got serious. The police arrived, listened to my version and Joe's. He, poor guy, realized that he had been tricked by Karen, apologized, and left. But Karen? Karen was detained. She was handcuffed right there in front of everyone. The reason? Trespassing and attempted damage to property. The woman verbally beat up the policeman, threatened to sue the whole town, and shouted that I was a tyrant of the road. What about me? Well, I just watched it all with a coffee in my hand and a smile on my face. And that's how Karen learned, in the worst possible way, that other people's roads don't get touched. Don't forget to leave your like and opinion in the comments.